Okay, I'm going to show you how to make this sort of layered collage. It's a color theory lesson as well as a Photoshop lesson. We're going to be using Photopea.com, which is all the functionalities are identical as Photoshop. So you'll be learning at Photoshop, but you can do it at home on a Chromebook. So it's a great lesson for remote learning. I'm going to start out in Photopea.com, and I'm going to just do File, New, and we're going to, it says here social print photo. We're going to click on Screen and Full HD. And the reason why we're doing that is because we may use this at some point as a background for an animation. So we're going to hit Create, and then we're going to get started. So what I did was I kept changing the background and foreground layer colors. So you want to go all the way from where it's the most faded to all the way to where it's the most intense, each layer getting more intense. So you're just going to make a lateral move from the left to the right. You're not going to go up or down or switch to a different color. So I decided to pick sort of the bluish purples for my background color, and I decided to kind of pick the pinks for my foreground color. You can pick any two colors that you like, but just make sure that they're colors that you think look nice together, and also colors, where you're going to go from the left to the right, not up, not down, and not switching colors. Okay, so I'm going to start out with the palest color on the bottom, and I'm going to, so I didn't go all the way to the left here because at this point all the colors look the same. So I just, wherever it starts to look a little bit like that color, that's what I picked. And the same with the background color. Wherever it starts to distinctly look a little bit like that color, that's where I started. And I'm going to just gradually go to the right. So for the bottom layer, I'm going to make a gradient like that, and make sure that both colors are visible in the gradient. So now I'm going to do layer, new, layer, and I'm going to now change the colors. So I'm going to go a little bit to the right, hit OK, and for the background color, a bit to the right, and go OK. And then I'll go to the gradient again and try and make sure both colors are visible within the frame. So again, layer, new, layer. The colors are gradually changing with each layer. So hit OK, go down here, go to the right a little bit, hit OK, and another gradient. Again, you try and make sure they're both visible. Layer, new, layer. And change the colors again, just a bit. And so you can see how the colors aren't changing their hue. They're the same color, but they're changing their intensity. Okay. So layer, new, layer. And you want the colors in the foreground to be more intense and the colors in the background to be faded. Think about how things fade off into the distance. So it looks like I forgot to change the colors. So let me just do Command Z to undo that, and I will get the colors a little bit more intense. Not long now, maybe one more layer. Okay, layer, new, layer, and you can see how the colors have changed from the top to the bottom. Okay, so let's change the color again. I think one more after this, so hit OK, and this one a little bit more intense. And this next one's going to be our last one. So layer, new, layer. Okay. So now we get all the way to the most intense, all the way to the right-hand corner for both of them. And this is our last gradient. Okay. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to right-click, and we're going to go to blending options, and we're going to click a drop shadow for each layer. And you'll see why in a minute. It looks really cool. Let's do blending options, drop shadow, and we'll do that for each layer. It doesn't make a difference now, but it will when we start cutting things out. And there are several different ways to do this. All right, we don't have to worry about the background layer because we're not going to be cutting anything out of that one. Okay, so let's go to the top, and I'm going to start out with the elliptical marquee tool. I'm just going to cut out a circle, fairly large circle, and then hit backspace. And then I'm going to go down here. I'll deselect, and then I'm going to go to the next layer down. I'm going to cut out another circle and hit the delete or backspace on the keyboard. So deselect, and then go down one more layer. And you can see how it looks very, very, very three-dimensional. Okay, so this sort of layered background in an animation could be really cool because you could have things coming out of it and going through the different layers, to create a sense of depth and movement. You could create some really interesting abstract designs in an animation, a real neat sense of movement. So there's a lot of possibilities. So we're going to be saving these as layered Photoshop files, and we'll also export them as portable network graphics so that you get a flat picture as well. Okay, so let me go down to the next layer, and the last one. Now, if I use my magnifying glass, I can zoom in here a little bit and get a last teeny tiny itty bitty one, just to give it a real punched out sense of depth. Okay, so let's see. Nice. All right, so there's that. Now I'm looking, and the top one and the second one look very much alike. So I'm going to go to the second layer, and I'm going to do image adjustments, curves, and I will try and play around with that. There we go. So now it looks a little different from the top one. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to use the rectangular selection tool. So that's a really neat effect. So you can see where you get all sorts of interesting things, levels of depth here, all sorts of ways. Now, the next thing that we can do is we can actually just use an eraser. So I'm going to go to the eraser, and I've set the eraser to be very hard and kind of a medium size. And I'm just going to make a squiggly line here and go here, Control Z, and I'm going to keep it to that top squiggly line. And what I'm going to do in the line below it is I'm going to go back to my elliptical marquee tool, and I'm going to cut out some holes. So watch what happens. I'm going to go down to a lower level and cut out another hole. Okay, so I can make the holes at different levels. So I'm going to start here. And I can now go down to a lower level and a lower level and keep on changing the depth of the hole. So some holes can be deeper than others. So that's kind of fun. I'm not really loving that hole though. I think it's too deep, so I'm going to do Command Z or Control Z and fill it in a little bit. There we go. All right, so that's really fun. I can go back here and just cut all sorts of little holes out throughout the design. And so I'm going to just keep playing around with depth. So that's what I'm going to keep doing. I'm going to keep playing around with the depth. And then another thing that you can do is you can go to the top layer and you can do Edit, Transform, Warp. And this gets really fun because you can actually distort or warp the top layer. So whenever you feel you're done, you can stop playing, and I want you to save it a couple of different ways. So the first way that you're going to save it is you're going to change the name of it. Right now it's called New Project. So you're going to change it to 3D Cutout Experiment. Okay. And you're going to now do File, Save as PSD, which means Photoshop document. And you'll hit Save. Always make sure to name it before you save it, because if each one's called Project 1 or New Project, you're not going to know which is which. So let's take a minute to also do export as PNG, and we'll just export it as a PNG. And you can put both the layered file, the Photoshop file, and you're also going to put the portable network graphic, the PNG file, into Google Classroom. And the reason why you want to do that is one of them might be a picture that you print out, but the other one with all the layers might be a setting that you use in some sort of a setting that you might use for an abstract animation. So you want to keep all the layers intact in case you want to have characters falling through the holes or coming out from the holes and coming out through the different layers and interacting with them, which is something you can do in an animation.